Hello. This is an update to a project I've been working on for several years and been working more in the last several months to understand the relationship between the seven Noahide Commandments and the 613 Jewish commandments. And this originally went into my mind through two areas. One is the Malbim gives a commentary in the beginning of Genesis, or near the beginning of Genesis, stating that the laws that were given to Adam, the 6 laws, or some people would say 7 laws, given to Adam, can be expanded out to understand the entire 613. The 613 can be connected to the laws that were given to Adam. And another area is a midrash, a commentary that explains that the patriarchs were able to deduce, they intuitively were able to logically deduce the entire 613 commandments from what they had at the time, which were the 7 Noahide commandments. So apparently there's a relationship between the 7 Noahide commandments for all of humanity and the 613 commandments that are for the Jewish people. And some of the books I've been looking at, a major help in this, in understanding the connection, is Rabbi Aaron Lichtenstein's book, The 7 Laws of Noah. This was perhaps the first comprehensive book on the Noahide laws, published in 1981. Now, the book was not written for mass consumption. It was more of an academic book. And the purpose of the book was to show the relationships of the commandments from an academic standpoint. And it was not to show that the 7 laws necessarily branched out into a wider variety of the laws, but rather to show clear areas where we learn the details of the 7 laws by looking at various Jewish commandments. And he produced a list of these commandments, and that's sort of the starting point for what I've been working on. Some of the other books that came out: The Path of the Righteous Gentile in 1987. This was the first book that was written for sort of a mass audience, and this was written by Chaim Corfin, and it's organized in a very straightforward manner, not the academic manner, but more of an easy read approach to it. And a lot of the information came from the Rambam's listing of what's included in the commandments. But then he organized it in a very nice, neat way. Another book that came out more recently in 2008, The Divine Code, which is basically follows the same structure as the Path of the Righteous Gentile, but it's in much more detail. And it was originally published in Hebrew. We got 3 volumes there, the one on top and the two there. And then it's been in the process, it's still in the process of being fully translated. So this is the first, about not quite 2/3 of the eventual book. And this goes into a lot more detail, and the footnotes are much more extensive than what existed prior. And the footnotes in the Hebrew is even more extensive than what's available in the English. Okay, so this has been the development, the main development, and there's been a lot of other books. I got a whole bookshelf back there of books that are written for the Noahide audience, but these are the main 3 books. If you're looking for, if you're going to pull together some books, these will be part of the main 3 books, and for understanding the halakas of the Noahide. Okay, so as it's been developed, there's been other ideas that have come in, and probably more philosophical, more rather than halakas, but more, of a people are looking for kind of a spiritual experience rather than a legal academic experience, and that's given room for another one of Chaim Corfein's books, the road of the Ger, which doesn't really go into the halakkas in an organized manner. It's very different from the Path of the Righteous Gentile. The Path of the Righteous Gentile is very organized and very structured. The Road of the Ger is more of a philosophical book, explaining an adventure that a person could have. You can see the nice, pretty picture on there, and that's basically sort of how the book works, as opposed to the other book, which is a clear pathway and a clear step-by-step discussion. So the Path of the Righteous Gentile was more of an excitement guide, and it got a lot of people excited. It didn't really give any clear structure. It gave examples of what people could do, such as taking on laws of kashrus, which are not directly related to the 7 Noahide laws, or taking on certain aspects of Shabbos. But there was no real structure to understand what it was, that a person could follow to do any more with that. And so I was trying to understand what kind of structure could we have to understand what's being explained in the road of the Ger, that I could then apply it on a more broader sense. I mean, so he says we can take on aspects of Shabbos or aspects of kashrus, but there's no underlying structure to understand how do I piece all this together. So I started to look at the 613 mitzvahs, and I wanted to have a reference guide so I could start piecing it together. When I started looking at Rabbi Lichtenstein's book, he organizes it according to the negative and positive commandments, the Rambam's negative and positive listings in the Sefer HaMitzvah. Unfortunately, that doesn't leave me with a clear direction to understand how it shows up in any of the other reference books of the 613 commandments. And the main two reference guides is the Mishnah Torah, which is also written by the Rambam, and the Kinuk, the Kinuk is organized according to how the commandments show up within the Torah, in the listings of the Torah. And the Mishnah Torah is organized according to it's according logically as to how it would fit it's more of an encyclopedic logical structure. I have yet to understand what structure was underlying the Sefer HaMitzvahs listings, the positive and negative commandment listings, but that's the one Rabbi Lichtenstein used. So what I wanted to do is I created a spreadsheet showing the 613 commandments, and it goes on for some pages here, and using the basic name, the common name for the mitzvah, where it shows up in the Kinuk, where it shows up in the Bible, the Rambam's Sefer HaMitzvah, positive and negative listings, where it shows up in the Rambam's Mishnah Torah, and when it shows up in Rabbi Lichtenstein's book, where would it show up? What's the subcategories within Rabbi Lichtenstein's book? So my hope is to look at this and be able to map out how not only it works within. Rabbi Lichtenstein was very precise in what he counted, but there's many other ways of asking, okay, how do the other mitzvahs line up with the 7, or line up with the seven Noahide commandments, the way that the Malbim would explain it. The divine code goes into it's much more deeper, and it goes in with its footnotes. It goes into many of the other commandments that Rabbi Lichtenstein did not include, and these are not clearly spelled out in the rabbinic writings, which is why Rabbi Lichtenstein did not include it, but they're still logically connected. Many of the laws of, for example, Rabbi Lichtenstein would have included not practicing oath, which is a form of idolatry. That would be, it's clearly explained that Noahides or non-Jews are not allowed to practice oath. However, he did not include not falsely claiming prophecy. A person who is not a prophet but claims to be a prophet, that is a mitzvah within the Jewish commandment. Now, a non-Jew is also not allowed to claim to be a prophet. If he's a prophet, then he can go through the system and be verified as such. But if he's not a prophet, but he claims to be a prophet, that would be prohibited for a Gentile as well as for a Jew. And there is a Jewish commandment, negative commandment 27, that Rabbi Lichtenstein did not include in his book, but would be still included as something prohibited to a non-Jew. By logic, that would be prohibited. And there's many of these similar commandments. So my hope is to kind of populate out how the commandments do line up. And to do that, I've revisited Malbin's. This is from the Essential Malbin. It's available in English. He has more stuff available in Hebrew, but what's available in English is what I have here. And on Bereshit, on Genesis chapter 2, verse 16, that's the verse says, "And Hashem God commanded the man, saying, of every tree of the garden you may surely eat, but of the tree of knowledge of good and evil you must not eat from it, for on the day you eat of it you shall surely die." So the Malbin explains on this, this is from Art Scroll. I highly recommend this book, by the way. It's a set of 3 books of the basic commentaries of the Malbin. It's available through Art Scroll. And what it says here, besides the commandment of the first man prohibiting eating of the tree of knowledge, our sages, and that's a Tractate Brookus 18b, derived from the verse an elucidation of the first 6 of the 7 commandments given to all of mankind. The Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach, each commandment, that's Bereshit Rabbah 16:6, chapter, and Sanhedrin 57a, not out of Brookus 18b. The 7 mitzvahs of B'nai Noach, each commandment being derived from a word, the phrase of the verse, alluding to similar word or phrase elsewhere in the Torah on the same subject. Adam was commanded, and he's given the 6 of the 7 Noahide commandments were given to Adam through this verse. The prohibition of idolatry, the prohibition of blasphemy, prohibition of stealing, prohibition of killing, prohibition of adultery, and to have courts of law. And the 7th was subsequently given to Noah, not to eat the limb of a living animal. Now, certainly prior to this, Adam had no need for these commandments. After all, from whom would he steal, kill, or commit adultery with? Rather, these 6 mitzvahs, besides being commandments in and of themselves to Adam and his offspring, were also general categories in which all the 613 mitzvahs of the Torah fit. So according to the Malbin, the 613 commandments fit in under the category of the 6 commandments that were given to Adam. That's just the way it's explained by the Malbin on this. The 613 mitzvahs of the Torah may be divided into 2 general categories. Mitzvahs pertain to one's obligation to God, and mitzvahs pertain to one's obligation to his fellow man. The first category, one's obligation to God, may be further subdivided. First, there's the mitzvahs that relate to emotions. That's love, reverence, and fear of feeling the subservience to God. All these mitzvahs are subsumed under the mitzvah, do not curse God. So from the prohibition of blasphemy, not to curse, the prohibition of blasphemy, we learn all of the Jewish commandments that are relate to emotions of love, reverence, and the feeling of subservience to God. Secondly, there are commandments in the practice that in practice prevent desecration of God's name. A loss of awareness of God in the world. These mitzvahs are considered branches of the prohibition, do not worship idols. So anything that would diminish the reverence of God's name in this world, and one might think that would be blasphemy, but actually that would be things that, or things that build up the name of God in this world, are under the prohibition, the Noahide prohibition, do not worship idols. And the mitzvahs between man and his fellow man fall into 4 main categories: refraining from 3 types of harm to others in their bodies, property, and marital relations, plus the general obligation to organize society and make civilization possible. These correspond to do not kill, do not steal, do not commit adultery, and enforce the law and justice. So the other 4 categories relate to the man and man mitzvah. What the Jewish people are commanded in the 613 relating to other people are learned out in those 4. Thus, the 613 commandments of the Torah, which God later gave to the Jews to observe as means to express their gratitude to the greater benefits they received over and above those given to all mankind, can be seen as extensions of the 6 basic commandments given to mankind in general. So we learn from this that the Noahide laws can be connected, and possibly the limb of the living animal given to Noah, the 7th Noahide law, could also be seen as a subcategory within all this. We learn from the 7 Noahide laws, it branches out. Now, there's connections. It doesn't mean that we're supposed to follow all the 613 commandments. What it means is there's connections between the 7 laws and the 613. And my hope is to populate, taking where I've already got Rabbi Lichtenstein's commandments, but to expand upon that with the other commandments that are in the 613. Now, that would show that there's a connection, which would, the main thing of the Road of the Ger is discussing these connections between the 7 with the 613. What Chaim Korfin does not explain is how this functions kind of under the hood. How do these connections actually work? And very importantly, how do I know whether or not I'm supposed to do the things where if there's a connection doesn't mean I do it. I don't go down every connection. If there's a maze of pathways, I don't follow every pathway because that pathway may not be for me. Even if the pathway exists and even if it somehow connects, doesn't mean I have to follow down it. Just like if a person walks down the street and he sees a purse laying on the street, doesn't mean he has to take the purse, take it home, and it's his. It doesn't mean it's his. It belongs to somebody. Just because he passes it and there's a connection there doesn't mean it's for him. And likewise, a mitzvah such as tefillin, the phylacteries, the boxes that Jews wear on their heads and on their arms, that's generally understood that does not work for a non-Jew. A non-Jew should not do that. Even if I can find a connection between the 7 laws going to something like phylacteries, tefillin, or doesn't mean that I would have a connection with, even if there's a connection with the mitzvah, doesn't mean that I should do the mitzvah. And that is something else that's being left out of the Road of the Ger book, is he doesn't show how the system works. He doesn't show how we should not do everything. We shouldn't, just because something's on the table. If there's peanut butter on the table and a person's allergic to peanut butter, doesn't mean that he needs to eat the peanut butter because it's on the table. And there's things that are available on the table that should not be done by a non-Jew, even if they can show there's a connection. And that needs to be organized. And that really is the reason why I'm doing this here, is to show, first of all, to show the connection, and then to explain whether or not that's something we should be doing, even if there's a connection. And that's my long-term project. I've been working on this for a couple of years, doing more of it recently, and it may take some years, hopefully, to come up with something that's comprehensive. Okay, thank you.